Hello and welcome to Gatecrashers. And today we are introduced to Dora and Gate 27, the Gate of Caring. Dora's kitchen was the kind of kitchen that fed people. Not just in the obvious sense, though it did that too, reliably, abundantly, with the particular quality of generosity that meant there was always more than enough. And the quantities had somehow been judged correctly for however many people ended up at the table. But in the broader sense, people came to Dora's kitchen and left it feeling something other than hungry, steadier, supported, replenished in ways that had less to do with the food and more to do with what it meant to sit there, to be included in the warmth of it, the unhurriedness of it, the sense that this table had been laid with them specifically in mind. Dora cooked the way some people pray, completely, without distraction, with her whole self present in the making of it, making something that would sustain the person who received it. Not merely good food, nourishing food. There was a difference, and Dora understood it instinctively. Good food probably pleased you. Nourishing food fortified you, sent you back into your life with something in reserve that hadn't been there before. She knew, without needing to be told, that her sister needed soup in the dark months and something celebratory when things were going well. She knew her father ate better when the table was laid properly. She knew her oldest friend needed feeding up in winter, and that the neighbour on the left had, for some unknown reason, gone off onions. Dora gave freely, all of it without calculation, without expectation, without the faint ledger keeping that can creep into even the most generous of natures. When the giving has gone on too long without return, ledger keeping becomes second nature. Dora was not keeping accounts. Dora was simply giving, because this was how she loved, and love for Dora had never required a return on investment. The thing nobody saw because Dora didn't show it, and because people who are very good at caring for others become, over time, almost invisible as people in their own right, was what it cost. Not dramatically, Dora wasn't a martyr about it, but there was, if you knew where to look, a quality of depletion that had become so familiar she had stopped recognizing it as depletion. A flatness at the end of the day, a difficulty when someone asked what she fancied, in identifying anything at all to respond with. A faint, persistent sense of running just slightly below full that she had long since catalogued as simply how life felt. Dora had been feeding people since she was small enough that she had to pull up a chair to get onto the counter. And she would tell you that she was absolutely fine. Now, it should be said that not every Dora carries this the same way. There is another kind, and if you've encountered one, you'll recognize them, though they can look quite different on the surface from our Dora. This Dora also has the gate, also carries the deep sacral drive to nourish, but this Dora's caring has curdled slightly under pressure. Not from coldness, the impulse is still there, the warmth is still there, but from a confusion that has developed over time about where caring ends and controlling begins. This Dora knows what you need, and this Dora will make sure you have it, whether or not you've asked, whether or not it's what you choose, and with a quality of insistence that comes from genuine love, but lands sometimes as something harder to receive. The caring waited just slightly by a need that isn't yours. Because this Dora has never learned to feed herself, and so she feeds others with a fervour that is partly for them, and partly because being needed is the closest she has ever come to feeling full. Same gate, same beautiful, necessary, life-preserving impulse. But one Dora quietly empties herself. The other fills herself with other people's need for her. But both are hungry. Dora's turnaround came on an ordinary Sunday, and it didn't arrive as a conversation. It arrived as a casserole dish. Dora had been ill, properly ill, the kind that pins you to the sofa for 4 days and removes all capacity for managing anything, including other people. This was, for Dora, a profoundly disorienting experience. She had lain there, genuinely unable to do the things she did, and had watched with a mixture of gratitude and faint, helpless bewilderment as her world continued to function without her running it. On the third day, her friend Binti had arrived at the door with a casserole dish, a bunch of tulips, and the no-nonsense manner of a woman who has decided what is happening and is not interested in negotiation. "Sit down," Binti had said. "I'm fine," Dora had said, which was patently not true. "Sit down." Dora had sat down, and Binti had moved around Dora's kitchen with the quiet competence of someone who had been watching how it was done for years and had, it turned out, been paying close attention. The casserole went in the oven, tea appeared. Binti sat across the table from Dora with a particular quality of stillness that meant she was not going anywhere and was not about to be redirected. "When did someone last do this for you?" she asked. Dora opened her mouth and closed it again without saying anything. She tried to remember. She went back through the months and then further and found not nothing, but less than she would have expected. Occasional kindnesses, moments, but the sustained, unhurried quality of being looked after, of being the one at the table who was receiving rather than giving, she could not find it recently. She had to go back quite a long way. "I don't need," she started. "Dora," said Binti. The casserole was extraordinary, as it happened. Dora ate 2 portions and fell asleep on the sofa under a blanket that Binti had located correctly in the airing cupboard. She woke up feeling something she identified after a moment as replenished. She lay there thinking about that, about what it had taken to get here. 4 days of being flattened, a friend who wouldn't be redirected, a casserole she hadn't made herself. About the fact that being fed, actually properly fed by someone who cared about her specifically, had required her to be entirely incapacitated first. She thought about the oxygen mask. She had always understood it intellectually. You couldn't pour from an empty vessel. You couldn't nourish from a place of depletion. She had known this, the way you know things that you've never quite applied to yourself. Lying on the sofa, full for the first time in longer than she could easily identify, and in ways she hadn't considered before, she understood it differently. Not as instruction, but as fact. Simple, physical, undeniable fact. She needed feeding too. Not occasionally, not in extremis, not only when illness removed all other options, but regularly, deliberately, as a matter of maintenance. Gate 27 lives in the sacral center, that great engine of life force, the primal driver of all things necessary to sustain existence. It sits in tribal circuitry in the channel of preservation with Gate 50, the gate of values, the keeper of what the community holds sacred. And together they carry the energy of protecting life, not just individual life, but collective life, the continuation of something worth continuing. This is a genetic strategy, not an intellectual one, not a chosen value system arrived at through careful reflection. It's a drive, a deep, sacral, pre-conscious drive. The impulse to nourish that predates thought by several millennia, the one that kept the tribe alive, the children fed, the sick tended to, and the weak protected until they were strong again. And it is precisely because it is a drive, because it is so fundamental, so automatic, that it carries its particular danger. A drive does not regulate itself. It does not pause and ask whether its host is adequately resourced before activating. It simply drives, which is why gate 27 is the oxygen mask gate. This instruction is not a nicety. It is not self-care as a lifestyle aspiration. It is a mechanical, practical, and precise instruction. The caring that flows from fullness is abundant and clean, genuinely nourishing, the kind that fortifies without strings, holds without gripping, gives without a quiet invoice attached. The caring that flows from empty is thinner than it should be, increasingly difficult to sustain, and eventually becomes something the carer cannot maintain and the recipient cannot fully trust. Dora's gift is extraordinary. The capacity to nourish, to make the table a place where people feel held, supported, part of something that has room for them. It's one of the most genuinely life-preserving energies in the human story. Without it, the vulnerable go unprotected, the struggling go unseen. The community loses the thing that makes it worth belonging to. But Dora has to eat too. This is not indulgence. This is infrastructure. The most important element in any system of care is the one doing the caring. Fix your own mask first, then help others with theirs. Dora still feeds people. Of course she does. This isn't going to change, and it shouldn't change because what Dora does matters in ways she will never fully see. In the people who left her table steadier than when they arrived, who went back to their lives with something in reserve, who were held briefly and completely in the warmth of being genuinely cared for. But something has shifted in the quality of it. She sits down now. Before the serving begins, she makes herself a plate, a small, deliberate act that took more conscious effort than she expected and has become slowly easier. She has begun to receive, which is harder than it sounds for someone who has spent most of her life on the other side of the giving. She is learning to say yes when Binti asks if she can bring anything over. She is learning, with some awkwardness and occasional forgetting, to consult her own list, the list that has her name on it. And it was always there, it was just at the bottom, and she hadn't ever scrolled down that far. And what she is finding, this is the thing that surprised her, is that when she comes to the table replenished, the quality of what she offers is different, more spacious. The food is the same food, the warmth is the same warmth, but there is something in it now that wasn't there before. A lightness, an ease, a giving that comes from abundance rather than from the determined generosity of someone running on fumes and refusing to mention it. Her sister said recently that lunch at Dora's felt different lately, better somehow, though she couldn't say why. Dora could, but she just smiled and passed the bread and made sure everyone had enough, including, this time, herself. Thank you for joining me to explore Dora and Dora's world of Gate 27. And as we leave, go gently, as always. Love yourself wildly. And remember who the most important person is in your life.